I should mention that originally we had 4 speakers on this panel, and we had Jan Madlock from the PE for Life program in Kansas City. She left the program and they just couldn't supply another speaker, but it is an interesting program, and if time allows in the question and answer period, we're going to talk a little bit about that program, especially for folks who are in that region so that you can learn about it. Just a few minutes ago, somebody said to me, you said the next panel is going to be exciting. After that, what's going to be exciting after that last talk? And I said, no, it is going to be exciting because we really are going to turn our attention to our children, Missouri's children, and we really have an opportunity with consciousness being raised around this issue and this multidisciplinary group of people who are committed to making a difference for our children right here in Missouri. And I can't think of anything more exciting than that. So I'm going to introduce the speakers one at a time. We're going to actually reverse the order a little bit, and we're going to start with Amy Stringer Hessel. I got the wrong stuff. I'll probably do this from memory, but Amy is a program officer at the Missouri Foundation for Health, and she happens to be the team leader of the Healthy and Active Communities Initiative. And that initiative has already invested $15 million towards active living and healthy eating in the state. And I used to work in Washington, and that may have not have been that much money there, but in this state, $15 million is a lot of money. She participates on the MOCAN, the Missouri Council on Obesity and Nutrition, and also is active on a St. Louis coalition committed to combating youth obesity. Prior to coming to the foundation, she was at the United Way of Greater St. Louis. Amy has her Master's of Social Work from Washington University in St. Louis, and welcome.
Hi, thanks for hanging in with us today. It's quite a treat to follow Morgan Spurlock. My husband just said, dude. So I'm going to try my best. I'm here from Missouri Foundation for Health, and we are a health funder in the state. We fund about 2/3 of the state and focus on the uninsured, the underinsured, and underserved in Missouri. But the initiative I'm going to speak about today is Healthy and Active Communities, and this is our obesity prevention effort. This is the vision, our vision statement for our initiative, and what we're really focusing on is obviously grant making. That's the bulk of our business. But we're also really trying to build a community of grantees and connect with other communities of people working on this issue and really take the issue to the next level in the state of Missouri. So what I want to tell y'all about today is kind of give you a story of who we are, what our partners are doing, and what we hope to see in the future for our state. So our entire initiative is framed around the socio-ecological model, and I'm sure many of you have seen this before. Actually, in Morgan's discussion, he was kind of giving some examples of this when he was talking about the kid who's in the classroom maybe learning about nutrition, who then goes to the cafeteria where they can have ding-dongs and a Slurpee for lunch. Kind of hard to make a good choice there. Then they're maybe going home, parents are tired, rushed, going to the fast food. It's not really carrying through to all levels. So even though we want that child to see a change on an individual level, we've got to have all these other levels encompassing them and helping to shift our culture and cultural norms so that we're able to make healthy choices easily. We don't have to really think about it. It's just something normal in our lives. So here are just some pictures of some of our grantees and some well, there they go. There were some pictures of some of our grantees and grantee activities. What that was supposed to show you is we do funding, but we also have convenings with our partners. There was a picture in there of some of our grantees involved in one of the programs called Spark. We had one of the trainers come in and actually work with grantees so they could experience it. We've done various trainings about how to be an advocate in the state legislature for these issues, and so we do trainings around that. And we also have opportunities for grantees to go out in different expos. There was a picture of a young man. He was pedaling a bike, and it was creating a Slurpee on the back. It was driving a blender. And that was at an expo, and it was with one of our grantees called TrailNet that really promotes biking in the community. So just some examples of our overall initiative. So in the grant making specifically, we focus on these 4 areas. We're looking at program, education, access to opportunities for physical activity and nutrition, And then also policy change. And what our grantees have really focused on, and what we ask them to focus on primarily at this point, is local policy change. So that could be school wellness. It could also be workplace wellness issues, local zoning issues, things of that nature. Anything that's going to really help impact and fill out that whole model so that we're living in a community that lends itself to health and wellness. So this is our coverage area for Missouri Foundation for Health for the counties that are served by healthy and active communities. So they're either in the red, any of the colored in counties. The light gray shows you where we do not fund, so we fund the rest of the state. So we have a pretty decent coverage going with these activities. And we actually also have, I should mention, a really wide variety of the types of activities that we're funding. So we put those 4 areas we wanted to fund kind of out in the community and said these are the basic things we want to do, but we're not going to prescribe for you where we want that to happen, what you call your community, who your target population is. So we really let the communities define that. So we have about 20 different types of interventions that we're currently funding. We have community gardens that we're funding. We have school wellness, nutrition activities that we're funding, just a wide variety of things, construction of walking trails, et cetera. But one thing that's common amongst these programs is you wouldn't see those as standalone elements. So if you've got a project here in Columbia, you might see a school intervention that's hooked in with nutrition education, that's hooked in with changes in the cafeteria, that's hooked in with trying to promote more walking to school, those types of things, so working in concert. So I'm actually going to start with Columbia. I wanted to tell you a few stories of the grantees that we're working with and that are doing amazing things. This is actually in Columbia. This is the PEDNET Coalition, who is working with the health department in Columbia-Boone County, and they have a walking school bus program. And I know lots of y'all have heard about the walking school bus, and here's a picture of it in action. These are kids, shocking, actually walking to school. And they're escorted by volunteers or parents, the adults in this picture, that are helping to make that journey safe and helping to reduce those barriers that as a parent we would often think of. You might not want your kid walking to school alone. That might seem unsafe. But to walk as a group to make it okay, that it's all right to do. And so these kids are doing that. I believe here in Columbia, working with 14 schools and serving about 1,400 kids. Have 100 volunteers, but the staff that's coordinating, it's a 3/4 time staff. So something that's really attainable in lots of communities. And this group has been doing trainings around the state, and I think out of state possibly too, but doing lots of trainings with different groups so that they can implement this model in their community as well. So this is a great look at, they're using existing infrastructure. They had the sidewalks. The kids had their feet. They just had to organize, break down that barrier of perceived or actual safety issues, and then make it normal. So these kids are going to grow up with a normal idea that, yeah, we walk to school. Being sensitive to cultures is obviously really important. Oh, do I need to be closer? Being sensitive to cultures is really important, and I know we talked earlier today about health literacy with the LAMP project and working on translation services. And here's an example of a project that's working with the Hispanic community in Springfield, Missouri. They're dressed up as fruits and vegetables, and there's a guy with a big fish head. But one of the things that they do as an intervention is they're really trying to make the messages fun and culturally sensitive to different communities. And they host health parties. They're kind of like Tupperware parties, where people come together, bring their friends together. They talk about healthy recipes, different ways to prepare foods that would be, traditional foods, but in a healthier way. They have prizes. I think they have juicers and all sorts of things. They hula hoop. They dance with scarves, all sorts of things. But what's cool about this is it's talking about individual messages around food and activity, but it's bringing together your friends, maybe it's your girlfriends, your family, whoever you want to invite to your house. So that's another level of that model. So we're talking about interpersonal relationships. So my friends and I are all hearing this message together, and so it all makes it a little more normal to want to look at food and nutrition in this way. This is a project that would fall under that access area, and this is access to fresh food. This is Old North St. Louis in St. Louis City. It's an area of the city that's really blighted, lots and lots of vacant lots. Limited transportation options, not really great there. Very few grocery stores, lots of corner stores. It would be what people call a food desert. There just really aren't options. So I can get a lot of Cheetos, but I can't find a lot of apples. So this is a project with an urban farming group. They've taken multiple parcels of land, and this isn't just a community garden, it's actually a farm. And they produce this food. It goes some to members who can also work on the farm, some members who just pay, and then it also goes to a community farmers market where they accept food stamps so people have great access. It's in the center of the community in this kind of pedestrian plaza area. So it's very walker-friendly. They also provide coupons to food pantries in that community. So if you go to the food pantry for additional staples and stuff like that, you get these coupons and you can go to the farmer's market in your community and get these fresh foods. So a really great project in the North St. Louis area. Policy change, also really important. Really important for sustainability of these projects, because obviously you can have a great champion for a project, but if he or she leaves, sometimes the program or whatever the idea is kind of goes with them. But if it's a policy, it has staying power. And this is actually an example here. The gentleman is Dr. Baker, and he is the former administrator of New Madrid County Health Department down in the Boot Heel. The Boot Heel has an amazing project, again, multifaceted project, looking at multiple levels in that model. They're working with African American churches in their community. They've constructed walking trails. They have programming around the walking trails that pulls in students from multiple elementary schools, and they're obviously linked with the health department. And when they started this project, Dr. Baker said, well, we've really got to integrate some of this into our lifestyles, into the work we do in New Madrid. So let's look at policy, and let's look at policy in our own shop, in our workplace. So they met with their board, and they decided that, okay, we're going to have a policy where our employees have 30 minutes a day to exercise. They don't have to take it off their lunch. They don't have to stay late. They don't have to come early. It's 30 minutes. Just like people get to go outside and smoke or do all that, we have 30 minutes to exercise. So they put in a treadmill. They do stretching exercises if you want in the morning. You can go walking, whatever you choose. So they also had a policy around food, around meeting food. They were really noticing, gosh, the food we're bringing in here when we have meetings with our board or whomever is really not healthy. We don't have any healthy choices. So they now have policies around that where they have to have certain healthy options. Well, Dr. Baker has lost 35 pounds. Dr. Baker has remained at this weight. He has sustained this. And he's incredible. And this man is really a central figure in that community and very visible. And it's a great example to see that policy change at work with an individual. The health center that you see there, or the fitness center, looks like a pretty traditional intervention. This is in Clearwater School District in Piedmont, Missouri. And they upgraded their facilities for the kids in the school, and that's fabulous. That was really needed. Glad that they were able to do that. But the other piece that they added in was a policy piece to increase the number of hours that gym was open, have it open before and after school area hours, and then allow the residents to come in of the community and use it for free. So now we've got a policy that's increasing access for the entire community through the existing school. We're not building a whole new gym where people are having to pay, et cetera, but a really nice intervention. And the final project I want to share with you is from Citizens for Modern Transit. This is called the Ten Toe Express. This is based in St. Louis, Missouri, and it's focused on senior citizens. And what it's trying to do is connect senior citizens with public transportation. And there's a lot of research about if you use public transportation, you're going to walk more, you're more active, because you obviously have to get to the transportation, and then you go to your next destination. And if we have ways that people can utilize this and walk as part of a journey to a destination, not just in a circle, but have a real purpose, they're more likely to walk more and walk more often. And so these folks live in relative proximity to some stops on our Metrolink light rail system, but they are organized in this project to come together. It's just kind of a fun, let's have a walking group, very social kind of idea, bring them together. They have guided tours. They take the trains, kind of navigate the whole system. But the idea is it doesn't stop there, but that people realize, oh my gosh, this actually is usable. There are not as many barriers as I thought. They were finding a lot of people, even if they lived in really close proximity to some of these stations, just always thought there was a barrier because they always drove, so they didn't really think I could walk, but there were safe, pleasant ways to walk. They just needed someone to show them because it's not in their cultural norm kind of thing. So another great way to use existing infrastructure and just kind of change those norms and come together as community. So this is a graphic that's actually from our evaluation team. I think 3 of them are here today, from University of Missouri Institute of Public Policy. And as I mentioned, we've had these projects that are very, very diverse, and they're obviously doing their own internal evaluation on their project model. But we needed to also look at what could be the lessons learned that we could share about this entire initiative. And so the Institute has done an evaluation that's designed, it's a cluster evaluation where they're really pulling from these very diverse projects common lessons that we can learn. So what this model is showing us here is kind of a boiled down version that these are the elements that are really important. Needing strong leadership. You saw Dr. Baker, there was a strong leader. Knowing our aspirations, kind of the mission of what we want to do, the strategic planning, really knowing about our objectives. Those 2 pieces would really look at the internal evaluation. We've got to evaluate, course correct, et cetera, to know if what we're doing is going to be successful. Looking outside of our project at the landscape around us, we can't change that we're in maybe a rural area or in a blighted urban area, but how do we respond to that and adjust accordingly? Building relationships with others, whether that's local businesses, parks and rec, et cetera, and then having just really strong volunteer and staff quality, really seeing those as indicators of success. And then the second subset, there are some similar indicators, but seeing those is really critical to talking about the sustainability of these efforts, because obviously we want to see programs that continue on and don't just die out after the funding is over. So for Missouri Foundation for Health, some of our next steps to reach that vision that I talked about at the very beginning is to really talk to other funding partners in our state. And earlier this year, we partnered with the University of Missouri, who had convened a childhood obesity summit, and maybe some of y'all attended that. But they had a real interest in pulling together funders and looking at what we could do collectively. So we've been meeting through the year, and this is the group that's met thus far. And we've really based our work off of a national project called the Healthy Eating, Active Living Convergence Partnership. And they have a really great site that I would direct all of y'all to if you just Google that, where they really frame the issue and talk about positive strategies, not necessarily best practices at this point, but really kind of promising strategies to deal with this issue of obesity and preventing obesity. So we started kind of meeting to look what could we do that's similar to some of their work, that's similar to some other work that's going on around the United States. Live Well Colorado is a really great collaborative group similar to this, as is the California Convergence Partnership. And some of the things they've been able to do is actually have, there are different funding programs with different grantees, but bringing all those grantees together to do more of that peer-to-peer learning, doing leadership development. Some have done joint funding of projects. So we're moving forward, and we'll see where that takes us in 2009. For the foundation specifically, for Missouri Foundation for Health, if y'all are interested, please keep your eyes open. On February 1st, we'll be posting our funding programs. We're going to focus on promising practices in obesity prevention, and we've got a great advisory group made of both local Missouri-based leaders in this area and national leaders who are going to help us identify what models would be best replicated in our state. And then we'll also have a funding stream focused on environmental and policy innovation. And there's my contact info. So these are just kind of the list of impacts that we're looking for long term that we hope we reach with some of these interventions. So really wanting to increase the evidence base, looking at collaborating, so we're using resources well. I've talked a lot about the socio-ecological model, just filling those gaps and making sure we're hitting all levels. Having a shared message, programs that can last, and then policies that will help support healthy eating and active living. So thank you very much.
That was great. Thank you, Amy. Our next speaker is Steve Williams. Steve is the educational consultant for our Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in the area of health, physical education, and the fine arts. He's an active presenter statewide on curriculum and teaching issues. He has his master's in curriculum instruction from the University of Missouri. So welcome, Steve. I want to take your notes.
Thanks, Karen. I want to thank you for inviting me here today. I have tons of data to share with you, which is on my flash drive in my computer in Jefferson City. So I'm just going to talk to you off the cuff today. I'm beginning my third year at the Department of Education, and it's interesting because I was at work this morning and I came in, I missed the beginning of Morgan's talk, and I came right in when he said, and now here's the big problem, let's talk about the schools. And he's exactly right. And so I didn't know that I was going to get beat up immediately, but I do want to share with you some of the things that do happen in the schools. One of the things I found out since working in the department is it is not as all-powerful as I thought it was going to be. Missouri has a state statute that says that the schools are under local control, which serves a couple functions. One, it gives the freedom to set policy and stuff in the local school district where it belongs. And in the second place, it gives us an opportunity to pass the buck a lot by saying, well, that's a decision that you have to make. And that's actually a good thing, but it comes with some problems. The problems it comes with is when real policy needs to be changed, the department doesn't always have the power or the backing to do that. For example, good things that happen in schools a lot of times just happen to happen from the grassroots. I used to teach in the Columbia School District, and I know in the Columbia School District, both of our high schools just spent several $100,000 of fundraising to put turf in their schools, in their football fields, yet at Rockbridge High School, they don't have a cafeteria that can cook fresh food because they just don't have it. So there's everything that they have there is baked. So it's pre-fried, frozen, and then baked, and then served to the kids. They can raise $500,000 for turf, but they can't raise enough money to get a kitchen that works. That's local policy. One of the things that I do have the good fortune to do is work with several groups in the state. The MOCAN is a group that I've been working with considerably, and we're doing on our state policy board, trying to look at ways farm to school initiatives and state policy. And one of the hardest things that we've been working on, and I would like to give some kudos to Bonnie Lindhart from the American Heart Association, is a bill that we've been working on. Now, school policy can be changed two ways. It can be changed from the local school, from the local school board. It can be changed by legislation. I brought 100 copies. We don't like to make a whole lot of copies down there, but I brought 100 copies of that bill. It's the second time the bill has been presented to the legislature. Our sponsor this past year was Rick Stream, a Republican out of the Kirkwood area, presented our bill. It was House Bill 1891, and what it was a PE in the schools bill, and I was fortunate enough to be able to work on that. We took model legislation from the American Heart Association, which is based on recommendations from NASPE, the National Associations for Sport and Physical Education. And their recommendations are for specific amounts of time for PE to be offered in the schools. So I'm talking from a physical education perspective. The NASPE guidelines are 50 minutes a day, or 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week in the elementary school, 225 minutes a week in the middle school, and 2 credits for graduation at the high school. Those are NASPE recommendations, and our bill recommended those levels. This bill was presented to committee. It went to Education Committee, where it stalled. It never got out of the committee. It never came up to a vote. But it got farther than it had in the past. Some of the interesting stuff that happened with that bill is I researched several other states that had PE legislation. Florida last year, by executive order from Governor Charlie Crist, instituted daily PE in the elementary schools. So I called the folks in Florida to see how that was working. Charlie Crist, their new Republican governor, swims every day. He's very fit, and he thought that was an important issue, so he made it a rule. The problem was, he said there was going to be daily physical activity in the schools. Well, schools manipulated that and didn't do what they wanted to do, didn't realize the intent of the bill. So, for example, teachers are doing 5 minutes of jumping jacks in the classroom. They were counting walking to and from classes. They were counting walking to the cafeteria as physical activity. They had, obviously, non-PE teachers doing this who didn't even know what good physical activity was. So having seen things like that, we wrote stuff into the bill to protect those. Illinois has a high school graduation requirement for PE that's far more extensive than Missouri's. But the problem with Illinois is they have very liberal exemption policies. So a student who participates in athletics or an after-school summer program can opt out of physical education classes, and that's not the intent. So when we wrote our physical education bill, we took the model legislation from the National Heart Association that had those minutes, 30 minutes a day in the elementary, 225 minutes a week in the middle school, and 2 credits for high school, and we wrote in protective clauses into that said, In Missouri, we recommend these guidelines, but we also recommend that in the elementary school, physical education, and the middle school, PE is a regularly scheduled class. That PE is taught by a certified physical education teacher. That it should include 50 minutes of physical activity in the classroom. That it should be based on a Missouri grade level expectations, which are curricular recommendations from the Department of Education. We made sure that there was adaptive PE requirements in there, that students should be able to participate in physical education to the best of their ability. I get calls all the time from school districts that want to exempt kids from PE because of physical impairments, and our response is always to let them participate at the level that they are able. And rarely do we excuse a kid completely from PE, because there's also content that those kids can have on nutrition and safety and injury prevention that's covered in our PE curriculum. We do have a required state physical education test that's been in place for quite a while, and all 5th graders and 9th graders who take PE are to be tested in 4 physical components, and that's reported to our state every year. I'm going to be working with someone from Extension, Max Warner, and we're going to try to analyze some of that data and see what we can find. But we do know this. We do know that physical education is being limited in Missouri schools. Some of you may have heard of the No Child Left Behind Act. It's a bill that was passed in 2001 that's had a very high level of impact on our schools. And frankly, what it's resulted in a lot of cases, a narrowing of the curriculum. And a narrowing of the curriculum in the sense that what is being taught in schools is what is being tested in schools. And what is being tested in schools is math, communication arts, and this past year, science. We have data, national data, Missouri is not unique, that shows that science up until last year was being reduced. We have data that shows that art, music, and PE is being reduced. Foreign language and social studies is being reduced. Our schools are only focusing in a lot of cases on what is being tested, and frankly, it's not because of that, it's because it's what's being reported in the paper. And that's the problem that's happening, because the No Child Left Behind Act says that all students will be proficient in reading and writing and math by, I think it's 2014. 100% proficient regardless of how they came to school, what their background is, what their cognitive processing difficulties is. And I will tell you this, the role of superintendents in this state is going to have to change, because these proficiency levels are getting higher and higher and higher all the time. Over 200 schools in our state are not reaching proficiency. And as those rates get higher, and they're going up this year, when our students take their test this year, we're going to have more schools miss that mark. The role of superintendents is going to have to change from harassing teachers and school boards to raise student scores to educating their community. And here's what the superintendent has to say. The superintendent has to say, friends, I wouldn't say my friends, but friends, I would say, it would have to say, sorry about that. That was for my friend Don. They're going to have to say, friends, here's what this data is telling us. The data is telling us that 100% of our students are not reaching proficiency, and that's right. That's exactly right. It's telling us that our students that come to school unprepared, without good oral language skills, in other words, they haven't had good conversation skills before they reach kindergarten, are not reading at grade level. We know that a kid that comes to school not reading at grade level takes 2 years to get them to that grade level. Well, guess what? 2 years have passed. Now there's 2 years behind again. It takes a long time to get kids up to grade level. The data tells us that our students who have been identified as special education students are not reading at grade level. Does this surprise you? It doesn't. But here's what we're doing for those kids. This is what the superintendent has to say. Because the education reporter from the local paper doesn't know this. But here's another thing that we know. We know that an increase in physical activity in the school day that comes with a decrease in academic time does not result in a decrease in academic achievement. Let me repeat that. If you take academic time out of the school and increase physical activity time, it does not have a negative effect on academics. We know that. That's been proven. We know that students' sleep cycles change. I've been getting up so early in the morning that I can't even sleep in on Saturday anymore. I've learned how to take a nap, but I can't sleep in on Saturday anymore because we get up, because our sleep cycles get us to a certain rhythm. We know that adolescent sleep cycles change. We know that. And we know that during the deepest levels of sleep, that is when all daily learning solidifies itself in the mind. We know that. This is when everything we've learned throughout the day goes into our mind and it sorts and it says, well, this was an emotional experience, so it's going to go here. This is math, it's going to go here. This is language, it's going to go here. That happens during the deepest level of sleep. If you don't reach the deepest level of sleep, that sorting never happens. If you're a teacher and you've walked into a classroom, let me say this. If you're a parent and you've ever asked your kid to do something and they said, I don't know what you're talking about, and you said, we talked about this yesterday, and they go, I don't remember. Well, they don't. Because if we interrupted their sleep cycle, it didn't stay. But we also know that that sleep cycle gets later and later and later, starts later at night and goes later in the morning. So what do we do with kids when we get them up at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock for school? We interrupt the deepest level of sleep. We interrupt the part of brain functioning that solidifies and sorts prior learning so they don't remember. So, having said that, if we want to improve policy in our schools, we start our high schools later. We have physical activity in our schools, and we get our kids moving. We know that a kid who is healthy and has nutritious food learns better. We know that a kid that has water and is hydrated thinks and learns better. But we don't do those things because we're working on a 1900 model of education that says we take 3 months off in the summer. This is a model of education that says we're going to spend 45 minutes in math, and by gosh, you better focus. Now we're going to ring a bell, and you're going to get up, and now you're going to do 45 minutes of science, and you're going to love it. Now you're going to run around for a while. Now go paint some, and then come back, and we're going to do math again. That doesn't make sense because the world doesn't work that way, but schools do. So we're talking about large changes, aren't we? So anyway, from the department, like I said, there's only some things that we can do. I will tell you, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, but our department is very hesitant to make changes in physical education requirements for the schools. Having said that, there are two ways to make changes. One is local policy, the other is legislative policy. So even though our department is not itching to change PE requirements on schools, there's two ways that that can happen. And one is by encouraging that local school board to make those changes. The Columbia School Board decided to allow them to put new turf, but if someone had come with the same vim and vigor and tried to get new cafeterias, that might have happened also. It's a local decision. The other thing is support for this PE bill. We're trying to shop it again. We're trying to find a sponsor. I don't know if it's going to be Rick Stream or not. It may be. But we are going to continue to try to sponsor a physical education bill to try to get those policies changed in the legislature. When the legislature says those things change, then they change. We respond to that very quickly and very happily. And the last thing I want to say is, I think Amy mentioned it, but one of the books that has really changed my thinking on that is John Rady's book, Spark. He is a researcher who has done most of his work in ADHD diagnosis and treatment. He's not a physical educator. He's not a teacher. He's worked with ADHD kids, and he found that the kids that he was working with who had trouble focusing, who had trouble learning, who had trouble behaving, seemed to tell him that they felt more focused after physical activity. Students who were in taekwondo or played tennis or something like that. When they had that type of activity, they were able to focus. So he thought, let's look into this. Maybe there's something to this. You know, it's one thing for Beverly Sills or Wynton Marsalis to talk about the power of music, but when Warren Buffett talks about that. It's one thing for PE teachers to talk about the power of physical activity, but when a doctor talks about it, when someone who's been working with ADHD children who knows that it works talks about it, I think it means something. So Dr. John Rady is R-A-T-E-Y. His book is called Spark. I bought it on Amazon. It's a terrific book, and it talks about a lot of stories about how, through his research and his experience, that physical activity has helped reduce medication and increase the focusing and function of children. So that's all I have for now.
Great. You guys have been a great audience. We're going to have our last speaker now. And I know you'll enjoy hearing from her. Melinda Hemmelgarn is a freelance nutrition communications consultant, otherwise known as investigative nutritionist. And she's a national award-winning journalist with over 25 years' experience in public health, clinical, academic, and nutrition areas. She was former founder and director of the Nutrition Communication Center at the University of Missouri, and she really has blazed the trail in our community, introducing media literacy to nutrition education and combating childhood obesity. She did a 2-year Food and Society Policy Fellowship, and she writes a provocative yet practical food sleuth column in our Columbia Tribune, and this helps consumers think beyond their plates. She's won many awards for her work, and I know you'll enjoy her presentation.
This is a prop. I'm not going to drink this. So let me give you some follow-up on Morgan Spurlock. A couple little secrets that you might not know. He actually received an annual award recognizing his work to defeat the commercialism of childhood at the Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood last spring in Boston. And not only is the Super Size Me film great, but he also did one called What Would Jesus Buy? And it's perfect timing because it really addresses, especially in hard economic times, what families go through when there's this constant pressure to buy more stuff when that's not really what kids truly, truly want. Kathy Kopika has since left McDonald's. She's a registered dietitian also, although we certainly don't share the same philosophy, but she's now at Tufts University. And also, I had the same question that Morgan Spurlock did. How do you get kids to care about what they eat? And I asked Wendell Berry this. Wendell Berry is a farmer from Kentucky, and he's a wonderful writer if you can ever read any of his work. But he thought for a moment, and he said, get them to taste it. Because once kids taste what really good food is, they won't go back. And really, neither will we. So, I want to set the stage here by just talking about what is good food. In the American Dietetic Association, I've been a dietitian for close to 30 years, and kind of our mantra in the Dietetic Association is that there's no good food, no bad food. I don't agree with that. And I hope you don't buy into that either. All foods don't fit. And let me give you the definition of good food. For one thing, it is nutritious. It does contribute to our good health. But it also has to taste good. I would never want somebody to eat something that didn't taste good. It has to be produced or grown without harm to the environment. We have to start expanding our concept of food nutrition beyond protein, fat, and carbohydrate. It's so much more than that. But what is our obligation to future generations if we are not producing and consuming and demanding that the food we consume is not going to contaminate our children's water and air? It has to be produced humanely. I don't know if you know of Carlo Petrini, but he's the father of slow food. And he gave this great example of what good food was. And he said, he was out in California. He had this wonderful organic meal. It was delicious. It was fresh. He said, but the workers in that field were being treated like slaves. And he said, that's not good food. So the requirement that food is produced humanely is part of that good food definition. And that has to do with the farm workers and the workers' health benefits and the workers' pay and what they have access to in terms of health care. There is a farm north of Columbia, and it's actually a meat processing plant that a lot of Hispanic workers work at. Many of them suffer with diabetes. Do you know that they are forced to eat the food in the cafeteria? That is not humane treatment. I don't want to eat food with blood on it. And to me, that's what it is. And it has to be accessible and affordable to all. That means it has to be affordable for the farmer to produce it, and it has to be accessible no matter, this is a basic human right. If you saw or heard moral outrage when T.R. Reid spoke, I have moral outrage about the quality of our food system today. We're typically told we've got the best healthcare system in the United States. Well, we're also told, oh, don't worry, we've got the safest food supply in the United States, too. We don't. And we need to be vocal citizens to get it back. Okay, so what do we do? Every 5 years we tweak our dietary guidelines, which, by the way, talk about health literacy. I've never been able to read through an entire dietary guidelines bulletin. I think it's boring, and it just doesn't talk to me. It doesn't move my emotions. And what about the new pyramid? What the heck is this saying? We've even lost our proportionality message. But over the years, for as long as I've been a dietitian, the message has consistently been eat more fruits and vegetables, beans and whole grains, reduce calories from fat and sugar, balance intake with activity, and it's all about personal choice and responsibility. And I am here to tell you that we have got to start looking beyond personal choice and responsibility and more towards collective society. It's not all about the individual person. Many times they can't make the choice. So here's what we have, a nice graph showing trends in child and adolescent overweight. And I'm happy to tell you that I graduated from college and became a dietitian in 1978. Actually, about the same time the Happy Meal came out. But you can see here that for my entire career, everything that we've been doing has been a failure, at least when it comes to childhood obesity rates. I haven't been successful in keeping them down, so something's been going on. And if you look at that graph, I think you can look in 1970. All of a sudden, it's like somebody put something in the water, and actually, indeed, there was something put in the water. It's called high fructose corn syrup. And I'm not saying that high fructose corn syrup causes obesity, but it is a huge contributor to obesity because we can make things so incredibly sweet. Now, let me get to this Coke can. This is not the typical size of the Cokes that are sold in our high schools. And if you see on the bottom line here, by 1999, 85% of high schools had some sort of vending or soda machines. Okay, so and this is a small serving of soda, and this has 39 grams of sugar, which translates to 10 teaspoons of sugar. The typical 20-ounce soda that's served in schools has 17 teaspoons of sugar. Even if you sweetened your own beverage, you'd never put that much sugar in there. So that's what high fructose corn syrup has done, and it's been cheap, and we'll see how that contributes also to not good food. And also I just want to mention that the Happy Meal was initiated originally in St. Louis in 1977. It was so successful that it went nationwide in 1979. Now you have this handout in your folder as well as a couple of articles that I've done, but this again is another version of the socio-ecologic model of obesity. Most of our efforts, again, have been focused on the individual. And in fact, in a recent Nielsen study, they found that 80% of consumers say that it's really the person's fault or the person's choice, that they're eating too much and not exercising enough if they are overweight. But I want you to focus on these outer rings and to look at all of the things that influence that individual choice. And I use that word in quotes, choice. So what I've been focusing on in my work has been agriculture policy, advertising, and access. And those are the three things I'm really going to hit on. But very interestingly, if you look at that environmental contaminant issue, I was just at the American Dietetic Association meeting in Chicago and went to a fascinating talk on genetics and obesity. And BPA, the bisphenol that's in some plastic containers, that actually acts on a genetic level, changing transcription and translation, leading to hyperphagia. So all of this talk about the benefits of organic, it's real because pesticides and some plastics are the sources for these endocrine disrupting compounds that also play a role in the development of obesity. It's a much more complex problem than eating too much and exercising too little. We have all of these things interplaying together and acting on the individual. So the way I like to describe it in a nutshell is that genes are the loaded gun. Some of us have more susceptibilities than others, but it's really the environment and the larger food system that's going to pull the trigger. So if these Hispanic children have a greater propensity towards upper body obesity, if we feed them a diet of McDonald's, we're going to see that obesity much sooner than if we gave them a basket of food and taught them how to cook it on the other side of that slide. So the way I like to look at childhood obesity is that, yeah, it is a problem. It's a significant problem. But it's also a symptom. And it's a symptom of toxic environments and failed policies. And I want everyone to start maybe thinking about it in that way and thinking about how we can collectively change policy to make a huge difference. So let's just talk briefly about a couple of these toxic environments. Amy mentioned the food deserts. There's a great report out of Chicago about just this. The built environment is going to predict our access. So is our demographic or our socioeconomic status, location, and infrastructure. I want to tell you a story. My husband and I just produced a calendar to support the Columbia Farmers Market because, hey, guess where you get good food? You don't get it at McDonald's. You don't get it really a whole lot anymore at the supermarket. But if you really want fresh, good, local, regional food, you get it at farmers markets or direct from farmers. So we created this calendar called Farm Hands, and what we did was we interviewed 12 farmers. We photographed their hands. And I wanted to know 3 things about them. I wanted to know their greatest challenges, their greatest pleasures, and then I wanted to know what they wanted the world to know about their work. So besides weather and time management, which we all struggle with, what do you think was the #1 challenge to these farmers? Shout it out. Health insurance. Health insurance for farmers. This is why we did this calendar. Because we are not making a dime on this calendar. Every cent goes to the farmers market. The reason is because I attribute my health to these hands. Our children's health, my children's health, I owe to these farmers. And if we can't find them health insurance to keep them on their land, we're doomed. We don't want E. coli contaminated spinach that comes from California 1,500 miles. And why is it contaminated with E. coli? Because it's butt up next to a CAFO, where you've got a huge cattle ranch, fed corn, lower acid content of the gut, and can support E. coli 0517H7. Not a good situation. We want local and regional food systems. So the food and agriculture environment is huge. The new Farm Bill just came out. We won on some. We didn't win on everything, but we will allow schools now to have geographic preference so that you can get apples from Missouri instead of Washington. What the heck are we thinking, right? Our farm policy is so disconnected from dietary guidelines. If every man, woman, and child were indeed to eat the recommended fruits and vegetables, for example, we would have to change how and what we farm. Corn and soybeans aren't going to meet that dietary guideline. Our present food system is based on the assumption that we have cheap fuel, stable climate, and easy access to water. That is changing. And it's probably going to force us to change a lot of our eating habits, like it or not. We can no longer afford to ship food from all over the world. But when you have cheap fuel, and when you have cheap ingredients, therefore, and cheap labor, you know, all those immigrants that everybody loves to hate, if you're eating cheap food, you can thank the slave on the farm that worked without basic human rights. So then what the food industry does is they give us value with volume, and hence you have a supersized America. And here we have it. This follows the graph of childhood obesity. Introduction of new larger portions, 1970, 1999. And that little cookie there, that's the USDA standard cookie size. And the one on the other side is what you get at the mall. Now, I want to get back to this whole topic of choice. Now, I give talks all over the country, and one of the things that I really try to hammer in is this idea that we have illusions of choice. We have illusions of healthful products. I don't know if you've seen these little smart spots and little check-offs. Those are industry-driven. There's no third party saying, oh, yeah, you're right, that Diet Coke is a smart choice. It's not. And all of the foods that you see here are basically permutations of corn and soy. Cheap, processed food, obesogenic. Now, the media environment, I guess I came to this conclusion a while ago that food choices really don't come from dietitians and healthcare providers in this room, but basically from a multi-billion-dollar food marketing industry that we can never, ever compete with. I mean, $50 million going into a new Diet Pepsi commercial, we don't have those kind of budgets. And if you think about the influx or the invasion of media into our children's lives and how marketers really spend a lot of time alone with our children, I would say that's immoral and unethical as well. And I've highlighted those particular media environments that are targeting our children so successfully. You know, TV is still big, but the internet and advert games, I mean, at least with television, if you're watching with your family, you might be able to slip in a comment here or there. But when you're sitting behind your computer, it's an absolute, you know, it's an individual sport. And you're there alone with a marketer. And then we have cell phones sending messages too. Now, back in 1999, this is not a new concept, but the American Academy of Pediatrics said that television and other media represent one of the most important and under-recognized influences on children and adolescents' health and behavior, and their impact should be eliciting serious concern. I want to piggyback on Steve's comment about sleep. Children that have electronic devices in their bedrooms get less sleep and less quality sleep. And sleep, we know, is also linked, or lack of good sleep is linked to the development of obesity as well, due to some stress hormones and some digestive hormones, ghrelin and cortisol. So everything's connected. Now, the media environment, as you might guess, does indeed predict the media diet. The average child spends about 3 hours a day with TV, but about 6.5 hours a day multitasking with all media. And when you give parents the recommendation, you know, limit television, limit screen time to no more than 2 hours a day, we have to be very careful from a health literacy standpoint to explain what that means. Because parents will say, well, does that mean video? Yeah, it's all screen time. This is so tragic. 63% of children watch television during mealtime. When do we have to communicate with our children and to say, you know, what was great at school today? What was difficult? You know what I learned today? That's gone when the TV's on. And really what's sad is that 68% of children that have a TV in their bedroom are removed from their families even more. And we know that children who have a TV in their bedroom spend more time with TV. They get exposed to more media messages about not the good food. And we know that their diets are poorer than children who don't have TVs in their bedroom. So the number one rule is get the TV out of the bedroom and be a parent and just say no. You know, kids might kick and scream. We would expect them to. But we have to do what's right for our kids. We have an obligation. And then, sadly, lower socioeconomic households and minorities spend more time with TV, and that's understandable, too. You know, if a neighborhood is unsafe, mom is working, what's safer, go out and play in the street or stay inside and watch TV? Now, the Institute of Medicine came out with a report on food marketing to children and youth, threat or opportunity. I can tell you it's a great threat. Their conclusions were that TV ads influence children's food choices, their brand preferences and requests, that exposure to TV ads is associated with adiposity in children and teens. But listen, it also confuses children's understanding of food. So if it's Fruit Loops or if there's a picture of a fruit on a container, a kid thinks, oh, there's fruit in it. And here's that diet idea. Kids think that if it's diet or low calorie, it's somehow healthy. And really nothing could be farther than the truth. We're looking at quality of nutrients, not necessarily how many grams of fat and sugar. Now, this is Susan Lin, and she's a psychologist. She's actually a ventriloquist, and she does work with kids who are sick using puppets, and she heads up the campaign for a commercial-free childhood. And she said, you know, in her research, one 30-second commercial influences the brand preferences of children as young as 2. Now, I love to do this little experiment with my audiences because a lot of people say, well, you know, ads don't affect me. Ads, you know, that's the other guy. I'm smarter than that. So I thought what we'd do is just have a little fun. And I'm just going to go through these letters, and I just want you to call out what the product is. So A, B, C, D, it's Dawn. And nobody ever gets the cleaning supplies. It's real interesting. E, F, G, Gatorade, that's right. H, if you're from the East Coast, you'll know this. Hebrew National. I, J, K, L, M, N, Nilla wafers, yes, very good eye. O, P, Q, Q-tips, right, another cleaning item. R, S, T, U, it's Uncle Ben's, V, W, X, extra laundry detergent, Y, York peppermint patties, and Z, zest. So were you trying to learn these? I can still sing the Doublemint Gum song from when I was probably in 3rd grade. My point is that advertising and marketing is extremely seductive, and it's really the reason why I got into media literacy. What is the broken system or broken policy here? What does this privatization of schools and the branded products being sold to our kids, what is that reflective of? What failed policy? Not enough public education funding. And everybody in this room should be morally outraged over that and not allow our legislators to cut public education budgets. It is not acceptable for Coke and Pepsi to bring their advertising machines in that also dispense soda. And 65% of those profits go to the distributor, and 35% go to the school, and they're so desperate. They're so stinking desperate that they allow these marketers to make our kids sick so that they can buy sports uniforms or whatever. This is morally wrong. How about the Ronald McDonald fundraisers? I'm an investigative nutritionist, which means I really love to investigate problems where, the poor and underserved are taken advantage of. Okay, Ronald McDonald raises so much money for some schools to build playgrounds or to get equipment for sports. They can't say no. But what are we telling our kids? When something's at school, it automatically gets an endorsement from adults that we trust. So what media literacy does is it offers us a navigation tool. If you go to online and go to propagandacritic.com, you find the same media literacy tools that are used to deconstruct political messages. The same tools of persuasion are used whether you're trying to sell a war or whether you're trying to sell a soft drink. So we don't want to be censored, but we want to help teach children to be critical thinkers. We all need to think critically about the messages that we're bombarded with every day. So rather than having kids be sponges to information or cynics, we don't want them to be cynical either. That's not a good way to grow up. We want them to be healthy skeptics. So basically, like in a nutshell, this isn't, I do like day-long workshops on this stuff, but all media is constructed. That's the first thing to teach kids. So reality TV shows are not reality at all. They're scripted. We need to know who owns the message and what's in it for them. Does Ronald McDonald really care about your children's happiness? Or does he really just want you to spend some money there? Identify persuasive techniques. Bandwagoning would be an example where everybody's doing it. I got to do it too. What information is included is pretty obvious, but what about what information is left out? So we want to teach kids to deconstruct, analyze, and create their own media for their peers. And with YouTube, it's a great opportunity. We also want kids to find food truth, and this is basically taking media literacy to the sustainable agriculture platform. Where does my food come from? Kids are pretty sensitive to injustice, environmental injustice, as well as bad treatment of animals and people. They're pretty sensitive. They need to know if the chocolate bar they ate was harvested by kids or if it was fairly traded. What's in it? What isn't in it? How is the food produced? Under what conditions? Were pesticides applied? How will that affect my body? This was a project that we did with some Robert Wood Johnson funds at West Junior High School, and talk about health literacy and the food label. These kids were not able to make the mathematical conversions of grams of sugar to teaspoons of sugar. It was very difficult for them, and then they measured out so they could see 17 teaspoons of sugar. And then they created a video with, I'm here with Beth Federici, who's a filmmaker. I also did a media boot camp in the Boot Heel this summer, thanks to Missouri Foundation for Health funds. It was one of the Healthy and Active grant projects. I like to call it Healthy and Activism, actually. What we did was we had kids take photographs of their food environment and then talk about, once they could see it, they could see what choices they had and what choices they didn't have. And then the question becomes, well, what limits your choices? And what choices do you wish you had? And how can you get there? Last couple of slides, I just want to talk about some changes that really make a difference. Promote gardening, farm to school, and teach children how to grow and cook food. Who told me or who told us that we don't have time to cook? I think it's the food industry that sells little meals in plastic containers that wants us to microwave them. But I can put a meal on the table in less time than it takes to go through a drive-through. So teach kids how to grow it, teach them how to cook it. About the ADHD, there was just some good research out of Illinois looking at kids with ADHD actually really feel better and do better when they've communed with nature. And the final slide I want to leave you with is this quote, and it's, "The destiny of nations depends on how they nourish themselves." This is so true. We can be sick or we can be healthy. On Tuesday, we're going to vote. But you know what? We vote every single day with our forks, our food purchases, and our voices. And you can have bad hair, you can be in your jammies, call your legislators. We hopefully still own the government. Hopefully this is still a democracy. So let's everybody question, speak out, and act. Thank you.
I want to thank our speakers, and we're going to open it up for a couple of questions. But before we do that, I just want to make a few comments. First, I want to thank Lindsay Beckman and her staff in the CME office, Shirley Walters and Nicole, and everybody else who's been helping with the logistics of this meeting today. Can we give them a round of applause? And then before you get out of here, please fill out your evaluations, because we really do read these and we really take them seriously, and we really take your suggestions after every one of these summits. At the very end, there's a list of topics, and we would like to know from you what you would like to hear about next year. And so take a minute to look through those and mark a couple of your favorites. Pardon? Or add your own, right. They only get 2 choices, and it's kind of a long list. Can we give them 3? Yeah. You have 3 choices. Is that okay? So we're going to open it up for questions for the panel.
Thanks to all of you. And I have a question for Steve from the schools. You talked a lot about PE, but I wonder about recess. I know here in Columbia, for example, there's no recess after 5th grade. And if you have information about the impact of that, and in particular the timing of recess relative to lunch. I know that's something that's been looked at.
Tess? That's a great question. I did forget to mention in the bill we did request unstructured recess. There's lots and lots of data on PE, on structured PE. There's also lots of data on unstructured playtime. And there's some merits to that. We did recommend, and I'm not happy with this fact, but only 10 minutes was as a bare minimum, and that's actually more than we have right now. We do have some state policy on required time. Physical education, again, in our state right now is 50 minutes a week, which is not enough. We have no state policy on recess. So any recess that any kids get is up to the discretion of the school right now. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a second part of that. Recess relative to class time, or I think lunch. I'm going to cite, there's several places that do that. I know that the research is telling us right now, and I can't cite it for you, but it does say that, let me get this straight, lunch before recess is much better because the kids work it out. No, recess before lunch, because the kids exercise and get hungry, and so they come into lunch and they tend to eat better. We know that when they have lunch before recess, that the kids tend to eat very fast or eat not very much because they want to get done, because in a lot of places they can raise their hand and go out to recess. So the kids want to go to recess, so they won't eat what's provided for them. So the trend is to put that so that they get their exercise and their energy out before, and then they have a tendency to eat better. There's also research that John Rady cites in Spark that talks about, again, the recess and the physical activity related to the learning, where they're actually in the Naperville School District, where most of this research originated. They're putting PE right before their most difficult academic class. Counselors are actually doing that. If a kid is struggling in math, they give their kid their daily PE class, which is required, right before their math class. And it's working for them.
This is for Melinda. I have a 4.5-year-old who's in preschool at a parochial preschool, and I'm appalled by the fundraising efforts that are all food driven. So in the interim of not being able to potentially change their policy, have you come across any good suggestions for fundraising that are non-food related that we could take back to our communities? Because aside, I know from mine, I'm sure everybody relates, I have nieces, nephews who are all doing cookie dough sales, butter braid sales, pizza sales, and I would love to see something different.
Yeah, that's a great question. The Center for Science in the Public Interest, cspinet.org, perhaps? Just Google Center for Science in the Public Interest. They have a big section on school food, and they have probably a page or two of alternative fundraisers. But, fundraising with food isn't a bad thing, but my suggestion would be to look for local food producers. We have in Missouri, we have a nut producer, Hammond's Nuts. Pecans are great. They're heart healthy. They're great for holiday baking, and you're supporting a local farmer or actually cooperative of farmers. Look for maybe doing a plant sale or selling seeds, selling garden equipment. Anything that's going to move us towards the end that we're seeking or model the behaviors that we're looking for. I hate to see anybody just go anti-food and start selling gift wrap. I think we have to use those same principles of where does the product come from? Was it produced in China by 14-year-old slaves? I don't want to buy it. I don't want that to be part of my fundraiser. So look, CSBI has some great ideas, but don't rule out food. Look at some local farmers.
I want to piggyback on that if I could real quick. I love what Melinda has to say, but let me tell you something. I taught for 18 years and was always in a school where stuff was being sold. And let me tell you a secret. You never want to buy the stuff they're selling. If it was a good deal, you could buy it in the store cheaper. What Karen said is true. About 60 to 65% of that fundraising money goes back to the company. And I'll tell you this. I did this once when I was teaching in St. James and did that god-awful $17 cheese and sausage deal. We took $55,000 out of that community the first time I did it, and only $25,000 came back to our program, and I never did it again. If you want to support the school, don't buy their crap. Write a check to the school. And they also lied. They also have a routine for this. And I heard a salesman do this once. Somebody says, "Oh, well, what if I'm selling this stuff and they don't want to buy it, but they want to give me a donation?" The company says, "Well, we want them to have something. So what we'll do is whatever the donation is, we'll just send them the cheapest item on our brochure." Well, all they've done is encourage that they just sold something. It's a ruse for them to sell something. So if you want to help the kid, don't help the company. Write them a check to their school, support their school. Don't give them cash, obviously, but about 65% of the money you're paying to support that school is going to a fundraising company.
It seems like there's an incredible amount of things that we could do through the schools, both to increase exercise and to improve dietary choices and options. I know that some communities have been incredibly successful in making that happen. It also seems like in some other communities it's extremely difficult to just get the pop machines out. And so I wonder if you all have any experience with communities that have succeeded in this, and if you have any suggestions for communities that want to really work on this and target this and how to be successful.
A community I just visited was actually in the slide presentation, New Madrid County, and several of their schools have been participating and have gotten their administrators on board in wanting to make food choices or make available better food choices, taking out the vending machines, working with the food service workers. And I think part of that success is due in part to the other efforts that are surrounding that. So again, the idea of not being an isolated effort, but bringing in that culture into the school through physical activity. They've really got the coaches on board in those schools to work in various ways with the students and promote these messages. But also in that community, because it is smaller, they're able to reach the parents as well through other programming, not just like a flyer from the school, but really engage the parents through the church communities, through just other types of programming that they might interact with, and through those interpersonal connections. But that's one place I've seen some success.
I'd like to add, my kids have both graduated from high school by now, but I remember when the American Academy of Pediatrics paper came out basically saying that we should get soft drinks out of schools. I naively thought, oh, well, this is all we need is this paper from pediatricians. I mean, who would know best? And I remember taking it to the school board, and the schools are so hard up for money that it really didn't matter. But one of the school board members told me something, pulled me to the side, and he said, I'm going to need to hear from many more people. Not only should parents, I think, be contacting the school board, but I think letters to the editor are a powerful democratic tool to use to make people aware of what's going on and to demand change. And it is amazing. Letters to the editor are very well read, and they get the attention of people in power. So look at all the people that are in this room. We can have a tremendous impact, I think.
Let me say two things to get onto that. Two is that I get tons of stuff comes across my desk, but the two things really caught my interest. One is that in the research studies where they've changed the vending machines to more healthy choices, there's an immediate drop in use, immediate drop in profit, but it eventually will level off. They just get used to it. Again, it's that kind of shock of where's my soda and why is there water or milk or whatever, but it actually does continue to rise after that, so it will work. The second thing we need to know is if, and kind of to allay our fears or beating up on the schools, is a study came out last summer that said most children gain more weight now during the summer than they do during school. So they're actually more active in school than they are when they're not in school.
Several people have asked about exercise and PE. There's a really good resource called PE for Life. It's PE, the number 4 for life. You can just Google it. They're out of Kansas City. They have a lot of training. They have workshops. Their first program was in Naperville, Illinois, which is a very big school, and then they have a small program up in Iowa of a town of about 2,500 and been successful in both places. And they will actually train people in your town to go back into your school. And what I love about PE for Life is it's not done just for the athletes, it's done for all kids. And they work with like Polar, and they put every kid on a Polar heart rate monitor. And so if I'm the kid who's not very good and I'm competing against you who's an athlete, I'm actually competing against myself. And the monitor feeds back all the information into a computer that the coaches and the teachers can use. And they teach life skills like rock climbing and skating, inline skating, things that you'll use forever. The kids love it. Grades have gone up, and there's a lot of research on that. So there's a lot of information on the PE for Life website.
And the emphasis is on personal fitness and not competitive sports, which is actually a huge national trend.
I want to just jump in with one more comment, and that has to do with teaching students to be democratic citizens or citizens in a democracy. And many of the successful programs are partly student-led. I worked with a school in Mexico, actually, where the students did a radio program, and they got to air some of their concerns. I think it's really important to teach kids to vocalize how they feel and what they need. It's a good life skill to learn. But imagine the power. Now listen, school board meetings are televised. What if students went to the school board meeting and got up and spoke and asked for something? Wow. Right? It would be documented. They could go home and see themselves on TV. The parents would want to watch it. It's powerful stuff. Use the media to your advantage.
Okay, well, I want to thank you guys. You've been a great audience on behalf of the center and all of our panelists and speakers. Okay. Yeah, and Steve just mentioned he has copies of the PE bill up here, so if you'd like to come up and grab a copy and take it back to your organizations and see if you can support it, that'd be a great thing.